Hello, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts. My name is Jamie Austin with CAS Worldwide. We're process improvement specialists. We help companies grow their profits by reducing their costs through increasing their internal controls. And with me today is Arthur Germain of Brandtelling, which is a very interesting story. So welcome, Arthur. And before you even say anything, tell me, what is a principal and chief brand teller?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jamie. I appreciate you having me on the podcast. So I selected the title of principal. Lots of people will choose president, some will choose CEO, but it's a small company. I wanted to be a little different from owner, but I wanted to show people that I have a little skin in the game, that I am the person that you're going to work with. And I found that the principal title seemed to put lots of people at ease. Because often they might see what we do and say, well, are you involved? If I work with your company, do I get to work with you? And it seems when they've learned that I was the principal, they said, oh, okay, I do. I get to work with you. You're the owner, the principal of the company. So that was why I chose that. And the chief brand teller was just a fun title. So we're brand telling, and I say I'm the chief brand teller, but I have other people who are my brand tellers, journalists who and marketers who write for me, and they're all brand tellers, in kind of my world.
You stepped right into my first question, actually, I guess my second question. And what is brand telling, and how is that different from marketing?
Sure. So, that's an interesting question. Brand telling is kind of a contracted form of brand storytelling. And the way that I got there is when I founded the company in 2005, about a year or two later, I had an opportunity to hear Seth Godin speak. And I don't know if you've ever heard Seth speak. He's wonderful up on stage, and he had just written a new book. And I went up to to see him at the end of his speech, and he was signing his books. He's autographing his books, and he was nice. He said, "So Arthur, what do you do?" And at the time when I founded the company, we were a technology PR firm. So I said, "I'm a technology PR firm," and he kind of cocks his head to the side. He looks at me for a moment. He goes, "So how's that different?" And there I am in the front of this line while he's standing there, and I'm stuck for an answer, Jamie. I'm like, I don't know. And he said, well, he passes me his business card. He goes, well, why don't you think about it? And then, let me know. And, that was his, get this guy off my stage, and also, giving me a little way out. And I went back to my team and I said, I was stuck for an answer talking to Seth Godin. It's embarrassing. The guy's a hero of mine. What's different? And so, what we decided was, what we did was, as marketers, was really a lot like what we did when we were journalists. We would spend time around a table saying, what makes this a story? What makes this interesting? What's going to grab someone's attention? I work with a lot of tech firms, for example, and they are always talking about speeds and feeds. And so we said, what really makes this a story that people are going to care about? And so that idea of story or storytelling is what really grabbed. And because we were talking about brands, it just made sense to say brand storytelling. And because we're marketers and like to make things up, we came up with brand telling as the title. So now it's brand telling. I actually have a full Circle R registered trademark. And for a while, the company was named a Communication Strategy Group, and we changed that over this past year. I think it's just about a year, coming up on a year now, and changed it to brand telling, really to reflect that idea that what is important is the value that you use to connect with your audience. So you talked right at the opener about how CAS Worldwide helps companies really to operate better, really to look at their operations holistically and to see where they can derive certain benefits from your partners. That's a value statement. You could say, we have accountants, we have lawyers, we have engineers. You could do that kind of robotic thing, and a lot of companies do. But it's really better about the story. And I'll bet the first thing someone says to you, Jamie, is, well, so, we're a law firm. Have you ever worked with a law firm? Can you explain to me how that works? And you go right into story mode. You say, sure. In fact, we worked with, and you start a whole story about it. And I think that's really the connection, because people don't want to be sold to, but they are happy to be storied to, as I say. They're happy to hear, your story. So that's really where it all comes from.
You're hitting me with practice what you preach. It's something that we talk about, even in our proposals, we say at the end that we practice what we preach, and that we'll be efficient and effective in presenting to you the information. You just did that because you tell everything in a story.
Yeah.
You just told me a story, and I get it. And I get it. I want to talk to Dan because I always tease him that CAS, which is, as you said, the original name you had is his original name, which meant something else. It doesn't tell what we do, so I'm constantly having to explain what we do. But when you introduce yourself and you say, I'm Brandtelling, it kind of tells the people what you're doing. I mean, it really, to me, it really does hit the nail on the head. So I looked at your website, and one of the things you had is, what does Brandtelling do? Now, you talked about it a little bit. Do you want to talk a little bit more? How is that different than advertising?
Sure. So I think of marketing as a big, wide umbrella, and things start with the brand. The brand is the promise that you make to the audience that you serve, and there are many facets to the brand. I know that a lot of people hear brand and they immediately think logo or color or website, and all of those things, in my mind, all of those things are in fact part of the brand, but it's really the story that all of those things tell that those are the pieces that go into brand telling. So when we're working with a company, I like to look to say, so tell me about your typical customer. How do you help them? Give me an example. If you have a concrete example, you just finished an engagement or you're in the middle of an engagement, tell me a little bit about that engagement. And it's interesting because as we get into that story and somebody says something and I ask a few questions, they begin to say, oh, well, we really helped them save money. They had no idea. They were just leaving money on the table. And you hear those phrases and you say, okay, let me just stop you for a minute. When I go to your website, it doesn't say anything like that. And you look and people go, they start looking at one another, go, yeah, I know. and I think that the storytelling part for me that Brandtelling helps with is it cuts through really to talk about the value that you provide the customer, the difference that you make for your customer or your community. Nonprofits may not have customers, but they serve a community, and it's the value that they provide. I'll give an example. Locally, we worked with the Hauppauge Industrial Association. We worked with them in 2010, and we did a small study with them and found that something like 50% of the members weren't physically located in Hauppauge, so that just didn't make sense to them. 70% of the members had services business like you and I, so the industrial part wasn't really for them. But every one of them, 100%, liked the idea of association. They liked the networking, they liked meeting and talking with others, they enjoyed getting in front of one another. So we helped them just to focus on using their abbreviation HIALI and talking about that. And now that makes a lot of sense because they talk about the Hauppauge Innovation Park that they serve, not the industrial park. And so the I can change. And I think of that story because, knowing who your audience is, that there were so many that were services businesses, really helped them to reshape that message a little bit that they had, and really shine about how they serve that membership. So that's a nonprofit. It's the same in the for-profit world, and my customers, your customers, that we're trying to tell them the story. So when we changed to Brandtelling, we wanted to help companies figure out, whether they refresh, reposition, rebuild, renew, rebrand. If it's got RE in the front of it, I've probably helped the company do something. We try to help them, think about how to, sometimes it's just a small tweak to their brand story. And sometimes it's much bigger. We recently went through an entire change that did involve the logo and the name and the website, but sometimes it's just, companies taking on a new acquisition. And so they say, well, okay, we've acquired this new company, and along with it, some people, but along with it, some new skill sets. How do we tell our existing customers and new customers who we are, that, does our name fit? Does our old brand story fit? And usually the answer is not quite. So what we try to do is kind of reshape and fold all that in. And that's what I think of the difference between marketing and brand telling. Marketing is how we're sharing the individual services, the individual solutions, and brand telling is a little bit broader, how we're telling the story that all of those things fit into. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And you're bringing me to an old mission statement I once read, and I think it was introduced to me as the greatest mission statement ever written. It was a boat builder in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. So, and the mission statement was, we build good boats at a profit if we can, at a loss if we must. And it's stayed with me for 100 years. I just think it just gives such a perfect story to this company, that if you go and buy their boat, that it's going to be well made, and that it's going to be at a fair price, or at least that's what it's conveying. And I think what you keep on saying is
for the customer as well as the boat building experience that comes from them, right? That they want to see you in a good boat. They would rather see you in a good boat that didn't make them a lot of money than a bad boat that didn't earn them anything.
I'm reading a book now that my MBA son gave me. It's an organizational behaviors book, and it's written in the form of a novel. It's fascinating so far. and in the very beginning, they ask the plant manager, what's your goal? And it's like, that's how he's being squeezed on productivity. And they ask, what's your goal? And when you talk about brand telling or storytelling, it's kind of like, what's your goal? It's telling the customer who you are as a company. So again, you're talking about marketing is the means to get the message out. Advertising is the form in which you get it out. But brand telling is the message itself. Is that,
Yeah, so, I think that's true. Years ago when I graduated college, I had a senior seminar, and this one particular instructor on the last day of the seminar said, I just want to tell you a story before you leave. And he said, once there was a church being built in Italy, and the priest went out to see how things were going. And one man was just slapping the bricks down, throwing the mortar on, slapping the bricks down. It was he had gotten quite far, but it was kind of a mess. And the priest just said, what are you doing, my son? And he said, I'm laying bricks, Father. And then he moved on a little bit. And there's another guy, and he was taking a little more care. He hadn't gotten his wall built quite as high as the first guy, but the bricks were, for the most part, a little bit better chosen. They weren't cracked, and he was putting them in there. And he said, what are you doing, my son? He goes, building a wall, Father. And he gets to the third guy. And the third guy has barely moved. He's selecting perfect bricks. He's cutting the bricks where they fall, where they need to fall short. He is laying the mortar on like he's using a butter knife. He is putting everything together. And he says, what are you doing, my son? And the man stops and he says, I'm building a cathedral to God. And I often think about that story, because it really is what was the story playing in each man's mind as they're doing the work. They're all doing the same work. And this is what I think about when we talk about competitors, especially when we talk about people who think that they have commodity products that they're selling. You could say bricklaying, that's a commodity product, but is it really? Not. It depends on what story is playing in your mind. If your story is that you are, serving this higher purpose, that you're doing something, I believe you're going to have a higher work product that comes out, and that's going to be conveyed to your customer. So again, it's all that story for me, Jamie.
It's stories. I love it. And that story itself, of course, Three Little Pigs kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's what was the goal? What was each
Right.
person's
What
goal?
was
So
the goal?
you're just driving home the point of this book. So who are you the right guy for?
Yeah.
Are you the right person for an established business, or are you the right person for someone who's just starting a new company to go and talk to?
So we help establish, strengthen, and promote startup and grow up brands. And what I mean by that is the startup brand is a typical one. Let's say you and I are working at a company and we say, you know, we could do this better, faster, cheaper, maybe more ethically than our current employer. So we leave and we go to work. But we may not be marketing experts. We may not be branding experts. And so we're thinking, what are we going to call this? And we're like, what do we call the J-Mart? Can we just slam our names together? And that's what we, that's what we name the company. And there are a lot of those. And so with that company, I can help them think about their brand, what their brand story is, and how it's different from the company that they left, how they are that differentiated firm. So I do work with those startups. We might call them pre-seed or seed companies. And then I also work with the grow-ups, a company that's gone through a pivot. So if they've made an acquisition, or they may have expanded their geography or their footprint, or they're just doing something that really has kind of blown the doors off of what they were doing. It's like that old New England saying, you can't get there from here. The things that you did before are not going to get you to your next level. So I work with those companies to help them reimagine the brand story, both for their existing customers, because they don't want to alienate them, but also for these new customers that they want to reach. And that's often there's a lot of fun there, but it's also a lot of challenge, because sometimes there are some existing customers that they're saying, we feel like we're abandoning them because we're not serving them the same way. And we want to look and say, well, how are you serving them? Or are you in fact still serving them? And what are you doing? So that's that second group that I work with. So the startup and the grow up company.
You're making me think of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Heinz ketchup. They don't sell their product. When they're advertising, their message isn't, we make a better soda. It's not like, was it Miller beer was better taste, less filling, or something like that?
Right, the Miller Lite stuff, yeah.
Right. So, Coca-Cola is got these, beautiful, commercials of happy people. I think of Heinz ketchup, where they're pouring the anticipation. They're not telling you that our ketchup is of a higher quality. They're telling you a story. They're bringing you to your memories. I mean, I remember, pouring ketchup and all. So I'm interested. You got me. I'm hooked. I'm a new company, or I'm established, and I need to upgrade my marketing and my message. How would I go about doing that with you?
So I start all of my engagements. Well, first we start off with a brief introductory call just to see if I'm a fit. I'm not a fit for everyone. There are companies that may not be a good fit. I don't do a lot of work with luxury brands or personal brands, something like that. So I may not be a fit, but a professional services organization, a technology firm, I'm usually a good fit for that. So first we start off just to see if we're a fit. If we are, then my process is very simple. We have what I call an open book session, where for about 90 minutes, I talk to, maybe you, the president of the company, maybe the head of marketing, maybe a co-founder, and I ask a lot of questions. And then a week later, I come back with some findings and recommendations. And this is like a blueprint that you could take and say, okay, I've got it. I know where we need to go. If the company, and that's a small paid engagement, if the company then decides, we really want to engage with you to go a little further, it directs into one of two areas, either one of my brand telling workshops, where we help to really establish their brand and expand it, or one of my content marketing subscriptions. And that's where the company really they're trying to build and share their thought leadership, and they're looking for a way to do that. So you can think of both of those as helping them set up a strategy and take that strategy out, the strategy for the brand and the strategy for thought leadership. And, and very often on the front end to working with other groups. So a group like Iliad, who's going to build a website or is going to, build an email campaign. I may be writing or building some strategy for that that somebody else is executing on. So those are the kind of things that I do. So it starts with us a quick introductory call, turns into an open book session, and then turns into a brand telling workshop or a content marketing subscription.
And you do all of this? I mean, are you a one-man marching band?
So I am the principal here, but I do have a team of people that I bring in, and I bring in the people that I need. If I need a designer, or if I need a writer, or if I need somebody to help me with the branding, I will bring in those team members and work with each of them on the account. But I like to stay involved in the account myself, so I'm always involved in some way, usually on the strategy front end.
Okay, interesting. I looked a little bit of your background, and it kind of all makes sense. You came out of CMP, and you were I'm going to minimize it to, it was a magazine series of technology. You were a journalist.
Yeah.
And what do journalists do? They tell stories.
Yeah, it's an evolution. I like to say that now I get to use all of the tools of my degree. I studied radio and television production and speech communication. I use all of those things today, but they're always about, like you just said, telling that story. CMP was a fantastic company to work for. So many people that have come out of there have started companies that do some similar things. I know event planners and other storytellers, content marketers, just people who, take that idea of story and experience and then help companies use that.
Interesting. Again, it's interesting. All right. So here's the $64,000 question. What is my brand, and what is the story I should be telling?
Well, I think what you and I would probably do to, was sit down. I'd ask you, some questions, but I'll ask you some simple questions right now. Who is the best customer for CAS?
Okay, we get that question a lot. Obviously, it's a privately owned business. It's the owner who is successful, and I say successful in that they have to be able to afford to manage the change, but it's to someone who is willing to, who can recognize their, let's call them their deficiencies within their organization, and is willing to change those. If we walk in and, we're going to tell you what your problems are, but we're also going to tell you how to solve them. And if you get defensive and you say, I know better, then you're not, and if you're not willing to change, then don't waste your money on us. And I tell the story, when Dan and I first started doing this together, it struck me. I told him the story. I said, my father, I was in a family business for many years, and my father would, come across somebody who was a consultant and would say, oh, I can help you. My father would always complain, his 3 kids are driving the business into the ground. And so he'd come get a consultant and meet with us. And then they'd come back and they'd tell us what we should do. And we'd look at them and we'd go, yeah, if we had the time, the money, and the resources, we would have done that, because that's what we told you we needed to do. And then we throw the report in a drawer. And this book was saying the exact same thing. What we did is we incurred an additional expense with no gain.
Right.
That's what Dan and I were saying, is not only do we want to present remediation, but we want to present implementation. So again, a long way to a short answer is someone who's willing to, again, I have to start with, they recognize their deficiencies and are willing to change. Okay, that was my 90 minutes for you. So fire away, solve all my problems.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you are change agents for solutions, which you could say is what CAS stands for, that you're change agents for solutions for these privately held companies. That the company sees, as you said a couple of times, a deficit, that there's something that they are, maybe it's some debts that they're incurring. Maybe it's an area of the business that they just know they could improve, but they just don't know how. And I think what you said about working with privately held companies, you want to work with that company that is sophisticated enough to understand that they have a challenge, but still humble enough to know that they can't solve that themselves. And I think that's often the kind of company that we want to work with. So I would consider promoting yourselves as, these as a change agent for solutions, to help companies become the best they can be. All of that that's a value statement. You can then finish that with, for example, we help companies, typically we help companies save 20% in their, in expenses through our, revenue expense model. Whatever makes sense for you. I'm working with an organization now that works with school districts and helps them typically save 30% in their annual energy budget. So if you think about school districts, they don't get to choose how much they're going to spend for energy. They just have to spend it because the lights have to come on, the air conditioning and the heating has to be on. But through some proper changes, lighting changes, new HVAC, things like that, my client can save them typically 30% annually. So so that's a number that they can say. So they're able to say that they offer guaranteed maximum savings. That guarantee is the number that they've seen over 25 years. They can say they know it's 30%. They can go there quickly. You might want to, that might be the follow-on statement for you. You're a change agent for solutions that save a company money or that help a company propel itself to the next level.
If anybody is listening to this and had any questions as to your value or genius, I didn't feed you that question in advance. I gave it to you I shouldn't say off the top of my head. I planned on asking it. And yet, in 10 seconds time, you took CAS, which, as we talked earlier, doesn't mean what we do today per se. And you gave it a name, Change Agents for Solution. And in simple words, what took me long to say, and I'm known for that, is we're looking for people who are willing to face the challenge and are humble enough to accept third-party assistance in solving those. So if anybody, whoever's watching and listening to this, if you ever had a question, he just proved his worth right then and there. In not 90 minutes, in 90 seconds.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I'm speechless. I don't have anything else to say.
Wait, Jamie Austin, speechless. Note the time and date, right?
We do. We have to look at that. And it's so funny because you're just hitting on all the things that I'm looking at and what we're talking about. Again, going back to practice what we preach. We've got to be willing to accept and understand and face our challenges and be humble enough to accept, somebody else's assistance. I want to just talk about that little piece then for a moment in the form of CAS Worldwide and our relationship and Brandtelling. So CAS is, as we talked about, we're internal process improvement specialists, but Arthur, you put it better. And we don't do all the work. We are strategists, and you are one of 40 plus members. And I think this is really what you're talking about is the person who doesn't have the internal skills to do the marketing or the accounting or the other services. The idea of bringing in the right people, and you have access to the right people. So when you start someone's brand telling process, you're able to bring all the pieces together. You talk about logo, message, marketing. You're able to bring all those pieces together, and you, as the strategist, guide them through that process so that at the end, what comes out is the right solution, is a quality boat, if I can go
Right.
back to that.
A strong, unified, and consistent brand and brand story is what we're looking to achieve. Again, I was at a trade show recently, and the booth was nice. It had a nice logo, and I got a business card from somebody, and I looked at the business card, and the logo was different. And I looked back up at the logo, and I looked down at the business card, and the guy said, "Yeah, we changed the logo, but I had some old business cards left over, so I wanted to get rid of these." And I said, for the savings of $200, you're going to destroy the $10,000 booth. You got to stop. So that consistency and the unity of the of the brand is really important. And I think giving everyone an understanding of that is really what I enjoy doing, so that they understand. Okay, I get it. That's why we're doing this.
There's a magic in what you just said. You enjoy what you do, and you're good at it, and it works well, and it serves the purpose for the people that you work with. Mm-hmm. You just, to finish up, you told me a story a while back. You talked about, I think you were working with a startup company. They were, we'll call them engineers or whatever they were, from another company, and they were going on their own with their own product. And you talked about taking the old material, yeah, and respinning it. Talk about that and tell that story a little bit better, because sure. I think it really, again, it conveys part of the strength of the right message.
Yeah, this is something that I've seen over and over, actually, with the startup company, but also with the larger company. One that sticks out for me is a larger company brought somebody new on, and they were going to offer a new service area, kind of a new practice area. And it was a technology firm, and they sent over a slide deck. So the first thing I noticed was it didn't look exactly like the slide deck that my client was using. Had their logo and everything, but the typefaces were different and everything. And they said, work with Jim. He's got a, he's new, and we want to, shape this up a little bit. And I looked at it for a minute, and then I decided to right click on it and open up properties and read the properties. And there was the old company name in properties. And I said, I deleted it off my hard drive, and I sent them back a note and suggested that they do that too, and said, why don't we just start with a fresh, I'll ask you some questions and we'll build this fresh. I said, because if we're going to reuse things that you brought with you from your old company, we're really quickly going to learn what lawyers do for a living. And they said, okay, yeah, that's a good point. And and I think that, he didn't mean anything by it. He had written it while he was there, but, now you're at a new company. Now you want to show what your new company does. So I forget what the practice area was. Maybe it was, cybersecurity or something like that. Well, you've got some best practices and tenets, but we can put that in the shape and in the story of how this company deals with other customer facing initiatives that they have. So it's not something from the old company, it's something fresh for the new company. And so I think that's sometimes people will struggle. That's why we'll use the old materials we have. So when I changed the name from Communication Strategy Group to Brandtelling, on one hand, there were some things that I wanted to keep. I had these 7 steps for brandtelling success that I wanted to keep, but I really went through each one and I rewrote them with a different focus. So while the names were there, I made some changes to better reflect what I was doing as a brand. And then everything else about the brand is different. The logo is different. The colors are different. The typeface is different, and I'm different. And I think that taking that and moving it forward, that's the kind of thing that I enjoy doing with other companies. So if you were to say, hey, we have a company, they're moving into a new geography, they're going to be offering what they do into this new geo, I'd want to ask, okay, what's different about that geography? What's unique about it? Why are you moving there? And why now? I had a a colleague when I was a writer who used to say, why this story and why now? And that's what he would ask anybody who pitched him a story. And if they couldn't answer both questions, they got clicked. So
All right.
I often think about why this story and why now? And you know, we're talking now just kind of post the lockdown that COVID brought us. And, you know, there's been a lot of changes to stories that COVID brought us. So that's a big why now for a lot of people, that has come with it's time to refresh and change and reposition their brand. And one of the main reasons is that COVID has really changed who they are, that the lockdown really changed who they are. And now the brand needs to better reflect that. So, you know, that's often where, you know, where I work and begin that kind of story.
It's interesting you say, we talked about the pandemic. It wasn't, it didn't cause change, it caused the acceleration of change. You know, working from home became standard, and a variety of other things. These things were all coming down the road. Change was always coming. It just was slow, and that accelerated it. I want to bring this thing full circle to the very beginning. Before we started this podcast, we were chit-chatting and we were talking, and you had said that you had cleaned out your garage, and I had said I was doing the same in my house. We were cleaning it out. Isn't that really what you're talking about? Is we all should, you know, look at our business the same way we look at our garage, and go in and throw out all the junk that we've been holding on to and finding out the things that we need. And we both said the same thing, is that when we got rid of all this junk and we had all this new space, we just felt a weight off of our shoulders and a sense of freedom.
I completely
agree. Isn't that what you're really saying?
That's a fantastic way to put it, Jamie. You know, the goal to cleaning out our garage was, could we find the ping pong table that we had stored in there? And we didn't get to play ping pong until the next day. But in moving forward for that goal, we managed to park our car in the garage. We managed to give away to the neighbors some things that had just been sitting around, chairs we weren't using, a cabinet that we didn't need, things like that got moved on. And then we threw away things that we holding on to this, and it's a little moldy smelling, isn't it? And so we moved those things on. And so I think it's a really good metaphor. You're right, for the business. There are some things that you hold on to, you know, and you say, you know, why am I holding this? It is a little moldy smelling, and you know, and letting it go. Take a look at websites. It's rare that you see a website, somebody says, oh, we're going to remove some things from the website. No, people are always adding some things to their website. So I think the challenge would be the same thing that my wife and I said about the garage. You know, for every one thing we put in that garage, we have to remove two things, or we're just not going to do it. If you said that about your website, I think you'd see websites that were much more navigable. People could find something and do something. And you know, your brand becomes. I like how you put that. I might write this up. Your brand becomes lighter because of those things that you've managed to get rid of and move past. I like that a lot, Jamie. Well,
you gave me one, so I'm glad I'm able to give you one. It's Absolutely. Mine for you. It's yours to keep. With that, I want to end with I just have one concern, and that is I'm a little worried that you couldn't find the ping pong table in the garage. I'm thinking, you know, maybe if it was a ping pong ball, but the ping pong table worries me. If you'd like to learn more about Arthur Germain and Brandtelling, you can reach out to Arthur at brandtelling.com, or you can reach out to me at CAS Worldwide, and it's my job to help introduce you to him and get you on the way to a clean, new, fresh, and open-spaced garage. How's that?
That sounds great. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on today.